Please let's welcome Mr. Christopher Ogiri.
Okay, the next person that will be part of this panel discussion, I will welcome Mr. Ayowale Popola, who is an experienced information technology and security professional with over 20 years of success in managing risk and protecting critical network systems within highly regulated financial services industry. He currently oversees security initiatives at FCNB, driving IT governance, security architecture, risk assessment and compliance. He also serves as a trustee of Open Banking Nigeria, where he contributes to policy and best practices on secure data sharing. His strategic focus aligns security with business objective while advancing priorities in cloud security, API protection, and digital innovation. Please welcome Mr. Ayowale Popola. The next person on the panel would be Mr. Stephen Asemota, who is the Chief Data Officer at First Bank Nigeria Limited. He brings 17 years of experience in data management, analytics, and artificial intelligence across financial services, retail, healthcare, and government sectors in both Canada and Nigeria. He leads the execution of the institution's data strategy with a focus on using data and AI to drive digital transformation. It also plays a key role in strengthening core banking modernization through secure, data-driven practices that support compliance, customer experience, and operational resilience. His contribution is instrumental in positioning First Bank at the forefront of digital banking innovation. Please welcome Mr. Steve Asemota. So I will hand over to the moderator, Sam, to take over the discussion.
Thank you so much, Joseph. And good morning, everyone. I'm very happy to be here. And I'd like to welcome the panelists. Thank you for accepting to be on this panel. Today, we have spoken a lot about the features of the new or the modern core banking. And basically, it's very clear that the modern core banking will be API first. It will be composable. It will be the kind that is extensible. And so we've spoken a lot about the features. And one thing that is very clear is that as we have all these new features added to the core banking or to the core solution, what happens is that the attack surface widens. What happens is that you need to pay attention to certain level of risk that you probably would not have paid attention to while dealing with some legacy system. And so that will be the focus of our conversation this morning. So this morning we'll be looking at the key risk factors that we need to pay attention to around cybersecurity, around data integrity, around data protection, fraud prevention, and also looking at regulatory compliance. So I'm happy that we'll be having this conversation, and of course, this will layer on all that has been said regarding ensuring a successful delivery. So I'll start with you, Ayo. One thing that is very clear from all the conversations we've had is that a lot of the times the business, the stakeholders are interested in delivering the core solution on time. Speed is of essence. You want to get to the market at the right time. My question for you will be, what should be the guiding principle for balancing decisions relating to implementation speed and security controls?
Okay. Good morning, everyone, and thanks for having me in KPMG. So I've been listening to all the conversation and all the risk issues have already been identified. But let me just try to put it in proper perspective. Nothing has changed. It doesn't matter if it's legacy or the principle are still the principle. So the guiding principle should be security should be an enabler, not a detractor. We must see it in that light. And, that helps because, if you don't deal with security from the onset, you still come back to do the rework, and it will slow you down eventually. So, security needs to be, seen as that, that look, for you to be able to, get the systems to customers to start using, it must be secured in an order. Like if it's not secure, you need to go back and do the rework. So some of the things that needs to be done from the onset is that you need to, the shift left approach, you need to ensure that security is baked into the process from the beginning. It has to be risk-based. We have finite resources, so we need to prioritize what is important, and we need to know that from the beginning as it concerns security. Ladi, you remember when we were in Fidelity Bank, I think I joined that the core banking migration upgrade a bit late. And they asked me for the list of requirements. I sent a long list of requirements, and there were some few weeks to go live. And it was obvious that that's going to be a problem. So we had to agree on what is important and what we need to do and what we need to do afterwards. Based on that experience, a lot of time people ensure that security is baked in from the. Also, you want to maintain your minimum viable security. You can't fix everything. And you don't have to, it doesn't have to be perfect, from the onset, but you need to, ensure that the core compliance and security controls are in place. Then you can iterate, and improve, as time goes. So it doesn't slow you down, but you know that the core security and compliance or regulatory controls are in place as part of your, minimum viable, product. And those are some of the things that needs to happen. Everybody must see security not as the security issue of the security leadership, but it must be, dealt with. Because if you don't do it, you come back and do the rework, and it slows you down eventually. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ayo. And I think that was a very good one. Security should be baked in from the start. As you're starting the project, we need to ensure that we bake in security, right? It shouldn't be an afterthought. We have seen cases where a new solution is deployed, and within the short time, the early stages of the solution, you're seeing vulnerable APIs, you're seeing a lot of other issues that probably were not taken into consideration while the project was on. Thank you so much, Ayo, for bringing that up. One of the other points that have been raised earlier today is around data integrity. We've spoken a lot about data integrity. We've seen cases where an organization goes live on a critical solution and there are inaccurate account balances, very embarrassing, it's in the news and all that. So my question will be to you, Steve. How can financial institutions proactively identify data integrity issues while modernizing core systems?
Good morning, and thank you for inviting me, KPMG. My name is Steve. I think from my own observation, the things I've observed in the market are sometimes this modernization is viewed as an upgrade in some cases. But it's really a business and architectural transformation program. If you look at it from that lens, you see the level of detail that's required to make such a program a success. From identifying the key drivers for the transformation itself, so I'm reflecting that in your new or your future state business architecture and data architecture, things like that. And when you don't do that, risks commence from the start. If you don't look at your data program as an enterprise asset in that way, you always have some areas that you miss. Because you may have people who are specifically competent when it comes to the general core banking transaction and stuff. But in terms of the intricacies and interplays, they might not have that breadth. So what I advise is, before you start, you have your baseline. Just work on your baseline, know where we are, have an accounting of all your data assets, what the implications are for your future state, The ones that you don't even have, what's the plan to acquire during the transition period? And then resources. I don't know how many organizations really have data architects, but I find that the lack of data architects or the absence of them negatively impacts outcomes naturally. It's not just a migration activity, it's an architectural transformation. So there's a lot of things that they bring to the table that maybe might not be so obvious based on the maturity of the organization and things like that. So I think it's important to have the right data resources, experienced resources supporting your transformation program. The things around the granular things around account balance integrity and stuff, I think will really be elementary once you have the stack properly laid out. So that's really what I think.
Thank you so much, Steve. And I think one of the points you made around the fact that a core banking modernization is not just an upgrade, it's an architectural transformation project or program that we need to pay attention to. And also the point around resourcing, and I think that's very critical. How many organizations have the right level of resourcing or resources required to do the needful? So, Chris, just also along that line, today we've spoken a lot around migration of data, whether static, whether dynamic data, whether they're metadata, whatever that we're migrating, being a sore point during most implementation. The whole thing around cutover, right? It's usually a major issue where you are migrating millions of records and all that. How do you think banks can optimize their data migration process to be more effective while ensuring integrity and quality of data?
Thank you, Sam, for the question. I think that Steve said something very important, the viewing of data as an enterprise-wide asset. I think that when you look at data migration as a part of core banking modernization, what you see is that many organizations look at data migration as just that core banking process. You need to understand your data. It needs to become an enterprise-wide asset, especially in the era of open API and artificial intelligence. If you don't own your data, you can't work on that data. So what you see is that many of the problems that stem from data migration really stem from a lack of data understanding. So you want to move data from this system to this system, and you are unable to understand that data. Data migration has always been a sore point, because of the way it is viewed. If it's not viewed as an enterprise-wide asset, it is seen as an operational task that needs to be done at the point of core banking modernization. There will always be problems. So I think that to address that gap, every bank should be able to do a core banking migration at any point in time, even on Christmas Day. And if you have that confidence, there is no amount of core banking modernization that will scare you because you are in full control of your data. I think Bolahan mentioned that every team should own their data. If you are a customer, you should own that data. If you are in finance, own the data. It should not be core banking data. It should not be core banking system data. It should be the bank's data. And as more and more banks become customer-centric, they become data-centric, that is going to happen because you cannot improve what you don't understand. So you need to understand that data, and that's the only solution to fixing this gap and this fear around data migration.
Thank you so much. And I think one point around the fact that you have to understand the data. You have to know the data that you own. And it's not just, of course, an IT data. Correct. Or for core banking. It's the enterprise-wide data asset.
I think in my experience, when I do data governance, data migration is always seen as an IT task. It is IT, what have we been storing? Which database is it in? I think the CIO of Zenimo said, okay, where is this data? But if the owners of the data truly own the data, they know where this data is. They know what the core banking owns. They know what other applications own. It is not an application-centric perspective. It is a data. It is how do I own my data? How do I gain insight from that data? And when it comes to modernization, how do I migrate that data to the new system?
Okay. Steve, you want to add to that?
Yeah. I think what will also help when you're transitioning, right, is to, and that's what an architect will help you do, identify the artifacts that are required to reflect that transition. When you have a business architectural transition is happening, your architects will work on the data artifacts that will enable those transitions. So you find that at the end of the project, you will, at least during the course of the project, you'll be developing artifacts such as maybe data mapping documents, high-level design documents, detailed design documents, and down into the quality assurance component. So that when you're going to quality assurance, your projected scenarios in the future, you account for them in your quality assurance upfront, right? I find that that will mitigate your risk significantly and also reduce time to outcomes. Just to add, thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Steve, for adding to that. Now, most of us in the room probably have seen the NIBS fraud report of 2023, of 2024. Over the last 5 years, what you've seen has been the increase in the value of fraud. You understand the actual losses that banks, financial institutions incur. The point around we're modernizing, you also talked earlier in the morning about the fact that you have a lot of third parties that are involved. There have also been a lot of cases where a number of these fraud-related incidents are also due to control weaknesses in third parties that you have connections with. So I would like you to, what are your thoughts around how we can manage supply chain attack, or what you call a third-party security risk, right? While modernizing core solutions?
Yeah, that's a very good question. And it's one of the major issues that you would have during data migration also. So during your modernization, you need to work with a lot of third-party system integrators, cloud providers, software engineers, and all the like. So you need to have a strategy around that very clearly, pre-engagement, process needs to be very clear. Then when you are engaging them, the contracting, the question that you're going to be asking them, what you're going to be looking out for, not just, and depending on the categorization of the, because you can't apply the same treatment to all the vendors. You need to be categorize them, and for each of the category that you've identified, you have different treatment for it. The high risk one, you ensure that all the checklist is complete. Their pen testing, their their SOC 2, type 2 reports. In some cases, probably need to even go there physically. You have your questionnaire, ensure that all those requirements are met. Then your contracting is also very, very important. A lot of time we don't pay attention to it. You ensure that contract-wide is tight. There are liability clauses, and this will become, much more prevalent going forward, especially with open banking. Because if I'm, allowing my system to be connected to yours, I need to know where the liability is. Do you understand where it stops and who is responsible for what? And I'm sure that's one of the things that, we are still working out, the open banking space, because that liability shift and who is responsible for what is extremely important in ensuring the health of the ecosystem. So it cannot be overemphasized. An issue around not just third party, fourth party, fifth party, ensure that whatever requirement, your security posture, you ensure that they cascade it down to all the third parties in their own value chain. Also, there's something that's very important that a lot of us need to be aware of, especially when it comes to your NDPR and the likes. There are some entities that meet requirements. So what you need to ensure is that all the people that you are engaging, especially depending on the kind of data that you're exchanging with them, they meet the requirement of the act. They are registered, you understand, and at that point you do all your due diligence, such that if there's any breach or any issue, they bear the liability clearly. Now, if you go and engage somebody in Oluwole, just giving an example, that is not registered, that is not, they have very good proposition, but if there's a breach, you can't tell the NDPC guys that this is the guy that I mean, they don't have the lab, they don't have the scale, they don't have the bandwidth to be able to carry the lab. So that's extremely important. So some of those things are not just security issues; they are more around your processes and the like. Then also importantly, when you are offboarding, we don't pay a lot of attention on that. Offboarding is also a critical process. That needs to be looked at and ensure that whatever policy and framework you put in place is applied end to end.
Thank you so much, Ayo, for that wonderful point. I mean, that was very good around the fact that it's not just the technical controls, right? You also need to look at the entire process from onboarding. I've also seen cases where a third party was onboarded, everything went well, they did what they needed to do, but at the point when they were done with the project, they still had access to the environment, right? And months down the line, their access was still intact. So these are issues around, as you onboard, how do you even offboard those that you bring as third parties? Thank you so much for that. Chris, I'd like you to speak to us about, I mean, Ayo mentioned compliance, right? With Nigeria Data Protection Act and all that. How do we ensure that we embed compliance by design into projects like this, right? So that we don't get to a situation where we're struggling with complying with relevant regulatory requirements just because we have gone through a project.
I think Ayo has done an amazing job really looking at how you handle compliance and the fact that it is not a technical discussion. It cannot be overemphasized. In fact, if anything, it's actually more technically feasible for you to be non-compliant than for you to be compliant. So it's not a technical conversation, it's a business and it's vision kind of discussion. It's like the business must decide that, look, from a legal standpoint, this is the level of liability you are able to set. From a core banking modernization perspective, we find that it's now become a concept of privacy by default. You have to look at your system to say, what kind of data are we collecting? Do we need to collect this data? And who is liable if something goes wrong with the data? I think it's going to become extremely important in this era of open banking and AI. In Europe and in North America, you see the evolution of the consent management platform. Yeah. It will become a standard in the next 10 to 20 years, where you now give the power back to the customer to say what kind of insight, what kind of analytics, what kind of AI can you do with my data? At the end of the day, it is my data. It is not the bank's data. It's not the customer. It is my data. And I choose in the manner in which I want to choose the manner in which I want to manage it. So in terms of NDP, I think that privacy by default is going to become critical. Consent management platforms in terms of how you allow people get access to people's data, especially with the era of open banking. If a loan company comes to you as a bank and says, okay, can you confirm this? Do you want that bank to store any history about that interaction? Those kind of questions are also going to be big. I think that also data residency is going to become a major concern because the NDPR and are all keen on data reside, and I think NIDA released the policy some months ago saying that your data all Nigerian data, I think around finance and healthcare, must reside in Nigeria. With those kind of initiatives and policies from governments, you see an evolution of organizations that build systems that leverage and support NDPR and that whole concept of privacy by default, keeping your data in country and supporting the NDPR. So I think it's an interesting time in how you modernize, but also while you modernize, you have to still be compliant. So it's an interesting time to be.
Okay, thank you so much. Interesting time. Steve, do you want to share your thoughts around that?
This is around privacy.
Yes.
So I think, the market is maturing, right? It takes some time. Even the regulator, in my view, there's a maturity process going on across regulator and regulated. Like Chris said, privacy by design is essential in embedding and mitigating the risk in your design, so that way you're not doing some kind of ad hoc stuff after the fact. I expect, obviously, consent management framework to be more mature as well, as long as open banking is being operationalized in the market. What else? I think training is important. You have to train your staff because, as unlike the fintechs, many of the banks still have branch operations where interaction between bank clients and bank staff continues. So how do you handle that data set that is not digital? Is also part of the whole consideration that can expose you to risk. If you go to and that is deviating away from the core banking conversation, right? Because core banking is great, fine, but you have other applications that you use to onboard customers or get documents and things like that. Those should not be left isolated from the conversation generally, right? But my observation is that there's been improvement and training, having privacy functions within your organizations, conducting DPIAs of a core banking or any initiative to identify the risk upfront and the mitigants to deal with the risk and avoiding them from crystallizing. I think that will be critical beyond just core banking.
Thank you so much, Steve, for that. My next question is for you, Chris. We've talked about data quality, talked about data integrity checks. How should banks engineer their data pipelines? I know this may be a bit technical, right? But how do we engineer data pipelines to embed the right quality checks and controls in a project like a new core implementation?
I think it kind of boils down to the vision and ambition of the bank. My personal opinion is that data quality should not be left as an afterthought. It should not be after the core banking, then we do quality. The future is that data quality should happen everywhere, throughout the entire life cycle of data that comes into the organization. It should happen everywhere. There should be variations, there should be validation, there should be verification happening at every touch point, every data touch point of the bank. The core banking of the future, I believe, is going to be a composable, scalable ledger. That is going to be its primary function. The data that evolves around that ledger is going to be immense, and there must be data quality. I think today what you see is that people run data qualities as a part of data ETL pipeline, happens at the end of day or happens when data gets to a warehouse or just before data gets to a warehouse. I don't think that is practical anymore. In the era of open banking and artificial intelligence, your data will come from so many other channels, so many other sources, so many other third parties. Your data quality must also evolve to be able to address data quality at every touch point and really align with the bank's business strategy goals in terms of how they want to use that data to give them an insight around the customer. That is where data quality is going to. It's no longer an afterthought. It should be baked in to the operations of the bank, not the core banking system, of the bank. So you separate the ledger, which is the core banking system, from what the bank wants to do. The bank owns the data, or is at least temporary custodian of the data for the customer, but it must be, data quality must happen across the entire touch points.
Thank you so much. Data quality must happen across the entire chain. Ayo, we spoke about the third-party risk earlier, but while we were chatting there, we were talking about insider threat, right? So what are your views around how to manage insider threat during a core banking modernization project? Because there are cases where fraud issues happen just because people who were not meant to have access to certain data during a project had access, and then there were issues. How do we manage insider threat?
Yeah, so, as you said, we were discussing it before we came to the here. You start from the preventive angle, you want to put all your security control in place, the technical controls, the MFA, also want to ensure that, you apply data minimization and all that into your process. You want to ensure that data for tests is anonymized or marks. You put all those controls in place. Then you look at stuff around detection. You have all your integration to your SIM, your, all the monitoring, your user EUBA analytics and all the like, so you can see what people are doing. Because a lot of times, sometimes it's not just that they might not be malicious, it might be mistake, it might be, that someone is disgruntled, but you need to be able to ensure that from the preventing perspective, you're able to deal with that. Of course, you need to do awareness. People need to understand the consequence. People need to understand how not managing data properly, can lead to serious consequences, for the institution. I think Mr. Adini also mentioned it, that look, I think the biggest find that we had last year, has to do with data privacy. And if you read the guide that you guys did the analysis on and share with us, you will notice that, customers, we are meant to also educate customers to be able to report us to the regulators. That's a big shift, And, when I read all that and checked the act, it was a bit scary because I think we've just been doing a lot of class action against the institution and the banks. You send me a text. Why did you send me text? Why?
Yeah.
I don't have an account with you. It's unsolicited. As little as it looks, it can now become, and that source can be from your employees. Maybe people just because of pressure recklessly opening accounts for people without their consent, marketing storm that doesn't take into cognizance, that you must seek the person consent before you send some funny stuff to them. It's a big issue that we need to deal with, not just from the technical perspective, but also from awareness, from sensitization, from people not understanding the consequence. But we need to ensure that we put in all the safeguards. Then now layer on it, stuff around training, and the likes.
Thank you so much, Ayo. And I think from what you've said, it's clear that as we have a business strategy, as we have technology strategy, have cyber strategy, it's important to now have a strategy for managing privacy. It's extremely important. And what we've seen in the market in the last few months, if you look at last year and then early this year, we've seen a lot of court cases where customers have taken a bank or taken an institution to court to say, hey, you sent me this. Why did you send it? You sent me an email. It was unsolicited and all that. So it's extremely important that organizations need to pay attention to this. Steve, I would like to hear your thoughts around how we can maintain customer trust, right? In a situation like this, where you're moving from one core system to another system, and people are aware there are already there. You have agitations around the fact that, oh, what are they doing with my data? What's going to happen? What are they doing with my account balances and all that? So there are a lot of agitations. If you check the social media, people will just, even if there is a downtime for some banks for maybe 30 minutes, you will see information around, oh, maybe they are migrating, maybe they are upgrading and all that. What are your thoughts around managing or maintaining customer trust?
Thank you. I think customers really respond to signals, right? So it's when there's some level of friction that you begin to get customers concerned. Customers themselves are not really interested in the details of your program.
Yeah.
At least as long as it doesn't negatively affect them. The scenarios or where you've observed some friction post-migration, it is that post-migration friction that makes them start. I mean, if you look at articles on how many of you want to translate, those kind of things. It's good to engage customers and say, look, we're transitioning, maybe on demand. I mean, customers don't hear what you're saying, but you talk to them, right? That we're transitioning here, and maybe between, and you're also trying to focus on the time where customers are least likely to be active. So if maybe between midnight to 5 a.m. or 4 a.m., whatever, there might be some interruption or it might be slower and whatever. So that way, mentally you've captured, they might be disgruntled, mentally they are prepared. And then you have to now make sure that in your delivery, that time window you've communicated is the time window that you're dealing with all those your maybe post migration risks, so that at least there'll be minimal disruption. At least if it comes in up to even to 8 o'clock in the morning, you have less blowback. But if it's now something that and if you look at how we interact today, where you're migrating your core banking, you're cutting off, maybe assuming you're cutting off this weekend or Sunday night or whatever, and we have POS merchants, they do real-time validation of transactions. And it's when your customer wants to transfer to make a payment for something that's important, your core banking migration is down. I mean, the customer will not hear anything you're saying, right? So, but I think that just goes to say the detailed planning of your program, resourcing adequately, covering all blades of grass within that program is critical to ensuring minimal friction. From a privacy standpoint, it's only when I find customers are reactive, more or less. Most customers are reactive. So it's only when you've migrated, they now start saying, getting emails or getting, like you said earlier, calls from random people. That's when they say, oh, you are selling my data, right? That's when they start having issues. But otherwise, I think they just want a seamless. They don't care about anything else. Let me just do what I want to do seamlessly. I think that's what their own priorities would be.
Thank you so much, Steve. Thank you, everyone, for sharing your thoughts. I'd like just in 10 seconds your parting shot. I'll start with you, Chris, and then we will wrap up this session.
I think data is going to be critical. I think with open banking, we see this already worldwide. With open banking, the amount of data you possess, the manner in which you use it, the manner in which you leverage that data is going to differentiate the performers from the non-performers, the successful from the failures. So data has become absolutely critical, but there is a regulatory framework in which how you manage, collect, and leverage that data. It must be secure, it must be compliant. And I think that we are going through an interesting time when I say that with open banking, with AI coming up, the potential, if you can manage that data and leverage things like modernized core banking platforms, is infinite. So that is a great time to be alive in terms of data management.
Thank you, Chris. Data will be more critical as we go into open banking and also leverage AI. Steve.
Just the data is a strategic asset. It's not an exhaust from technology activities. It's a strategic asset and it's important to use as such. So govern it properly, have a strategy around data for your organization, architect and engineer it properly, derive real value from it, financial value. It has real potential to possibly impact on your balance sheet or your bottom line, and govern it under regulation. I think that's really what I'd say. Thanks.
Thank you. Data is a strategic asset, and we should treat it as such. Ayo.
Yeah, I heard Chris saying that this is an exciting time. For security guys, it's not exciting at all. It's probably a lot of booby traps, but there are a lot of opportunities also. So and it's good that we have regulations that. And I think during your data modernization process, I think the number one risk is data migration risk, and things can really go bad. And it's important that we put a lot of emphasis and put all the required, controls, and liability shifts. Because in spite of your best efforts, if you are meant to share data with some set of people, they have to be held responsible for their own part of the stuff. Unfortunately, banks are the ones that everybody will be running after, even though if it is a third party that costs, nobody wants to hear. But hopefully, the framework will strengthen that and ensure that everybody is, as strong as the weakest link. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ayo. I think as we conclude this session, it's important to note that as we strive to deliver the core banking solution at the right speed to also deliver value to our organization, it's important that we have a strategy to manage cyber risk. It's important to have a strategy to manage privacy risk. It's important to have a strategy to manage our third-party risk. Thank you so much for your time. I think let's put our hands together for the panelists. I think it's been a good time.